He sat in the lobby like any other guest. Jeans slightly wrinkled, a duffel bag at his feet, a paperback novel half read in his hands. No one noticed the man who owned everything around them. The chandelier above his head? He chose it. The scent of fresh lavender in the air? His idea, the smiles on the staff, paid by him. And yet, in that moment, Daniel Prescott was invisible. He watched people pass by, families, business travelers, honeymooners, each one lost in their own world. It was ironic. For years, he'd built palaces for people to escape reality, yet he had never escaped his own. Until now, until he walked into his own hotel pretending to be someone else. "Excuse me." A soft voice pulled him from his thoughts. A woman, hair tied back, eyes like autumn after rain. "Are you here for the conference too?" He hesitated, then nodded. She smiled and sat beside him. "You look like someone who's hiding," she said without looking at him. Daniel's chest tightened. She wasn't wrong. That was the moment everything began to unravel. His past, his lies, and everything he thought he knew about love. Before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Every week, we reveal untold stories of hidden truths and second chances, ones you won't find anywhere else. Be part of a community that feels, reflects, and grows together. Don't miss what could change everything. Daniel Prescott was born into wealth, but not into warmth. The Prescott name had been synonymous with luxury hotels for over 50 years, and from the moment he could walk, Daniel was being groomed to take the empire further. His father, Franklin Prescott, didn't believe in childhoods, only futures. Every moment had to be earned, scheduled, justified. While other kids played soccer or built tree houses, Daniel sat in boardrooms listening to men in suits debate room rates and occupancy percentages. He didn't mind it at first. It was the only way he knew how to be seen. Every compliment from his father felt like a rare trophy, and every frown like a thunderstorm. Love in the Prescott household came dressed as approval, and it was conditional. By his early 30s, Daniel was the CEO of Prescott Hotels, managing over 50 locations worldwide. He had the cars, the penthouse, the media attention, and none of it mattered. The death of his father brought no grief, only silence. And the betrayal by Melissa Grant, his longtime fiancée, left more than a wound. She had been with him through it all, until she wasn't. Until she traded him for one of his own business partners. The burnout started shortly after. Insomnia, anxiety, moments where he would stare at a mirror and not recognize the man on the other side. He began skipping meetings, canceling interviews. One night, he disappeared from a gala honoring his success and didn't return calls for 3 days. He wasn't lost. He was drowning. In that fog, Daniel had an idea. What if he could just vanish for a while? Not as Daniel Prescott, the magnate, but as Daniel, the man no one recognized. That's when he packed a small bag, picked one of his least-known hotels in Vermont, and booked a room under the name David Price. He told no one. Not even Eleanor, the hotel's manager, knew the truth. He arrived like any other guest. No limo, no assistance, no fanfare. Just a man in need of something he couldn't buy. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Peace, maybe, or anonymity, or just a moment to breathe. What he found instead was her. Daniel didn't expect happiness. That was a luxury he'd never been trained to chase. But in the quiet of his hotel room, beneath plain white sheets and the hum of the radiator, he felt something unfamiliar, relief. No one called him Mr. Prescott. No one asked him to approve budgets or attend award ceremonies. For the first time in his life, he was just a man. And that's exactly what he wanted, to be seen without the armor, to be heard without the echo of money in his voice, to walk through a lobby and not have eyes follow him because of his last name. More than anything, he longed to feel real, something he hadn't felt in years. In his first week at the hotel, Daniel did what no billionaire ever did. He waited in line for coffee. He read newspapers in the lounge. He helped an elderly couple find their room. The staff didn't know him. They just thought he was polite, quiet, maybe a little lost. He didn't mind that at all. That's when he noticed her. Julia Bennett. She moved through the hotel like she belonged in another world, one made of poetry and autumn air. A housekeeper with eyes that saw everything and judged nothing. She was kind but not overly cheerful, smart but never showy. She'd hum softly while changing sheets and sometimes pause at a window as if remembering something she couldn't put into words. Daniel watched her more than he should have. Not with lust, but with curiosity. There was something heavy behind her calm, something honest. One afternoon they crossed paths in the elevator. She smiled and said, "You always look like you're thinking too much." He smiled back. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who does the same," she said, then stepped off as the doors opened. That was the spark. Not fireworks, just warmth. The kind that creeps in without asking. Over the next few days, they kept running into each other. Small conversations, shared silences, glances that lingered. Daniel felt himself softening in ways he hadn't in years. But he also felt something else, fear, because every moment she looked at him, she saw someone who didn't exist. He wasn't David Price, the quiet guest with thoughtful eyes. He was Daniel Prescott, heir to a fortune, and the owner of the building she vacuumed every night. And if she ever found out, would that warmth turn to ice? It happened on a Thursday. Rain patted softly against the wide glass windows of the hotel lobby, casting a silvery blur over the world outside. Daniel was sitting in the cafe, sipping black coffee, reading a novel he could barely focus on. Julia walked by and gave him a warm nod. He smiled back. Their connection had been growing, quiet and unspoken, but it was there, real, fragile, terrifying. That's when Marcus Hale walked in. A regular guest, loud, entitled, the kind of man who never learned to say please. He was on the phone, barking orders, annoyed that his preferred suite wasn't ready. His eyes scanned the room like a king surveying his servants. When he spotted Daniel, he walked straight over. "Hey," Marcus said loudly, "you're the guy I saw checking in the other day, right? You staying long?" Daniel looked up, unsure how to respond. Before he could speak, Marcus clapped him on the shoulder and chuckled. "I remember now. You're that guy from Portland, right? Small business something? Don't worry, buddy. Everyone's trying to be someone these days." He didn't mean harm, but the words cut deep. Julia was nearby, organizing the flower arrangements on the front desk. She heard it all. Daniel saw the flicker of something in her expression. Not pity, something worse. Disappointment. Marcus continued his performance, bragging about his yacht, his golf scores, how the hotel should be grateful for guests like him. Daniel sat in silence, letting himself be talked down to. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control. He could have ended it with one word, revealed who he was, shut Marcus up instantly, but he didn't. Because this was the life he chose. He wanted to be anonymous, invisible, ordinary. But that choice had consequences. Later that day, in the hallway outside the laundry room, Julia approached him. "I saw how he talked to you," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. "It's fine. Guys like that don't bother me." She looked at him for a long time. "Still, it hurts, doesn't it? Being treated like you don't matter." That broke him. More than he expected. That night, Daniel sat alone in his room, staring at his reflection. He wasn't crying. He didn't know how to cry anymore, but something inside him cracked. The mask he wore, the fake name, the calm demeanor, was starting to suffocate him. He'd wanted peace. He'd wanted truth. But how could you have either when you were building your life on a lie? And worse, what would happen if someone finally looked too close and saw the truth underneath? The days blurred after that. Daniel found himself avoiding the common areas, taking his meals in his room, leaving before sunrise and returning after dark. The warmth that had started to grow between him and Julia was gone, replaced by a tense distance. She didn't avoid him. She just stopped seeing him. And that hurt more than he expected. He kept replaying the moment with Marcus in his mind, not because of the insult, but because he'd let it happen. He had sat there, mute, accepting humiliation just to keep the illusion alive, and Julia had watched him shrink. She had seen the version of him he was pretending to be, and believed it. For someone who'd spent his life building an empire, Daniel had never felt smaller. One evening he walked past the staff break room and heard laughter. Inside, Julia was sitting with two other employees, joking over a shared sandwich. She looked so alive, so unburdened. It struck him then how little he really knew about her story, her pain, her reasons for working there. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a person with layers he hadn't even begun to understand. But it was already too late. He had built a wall between them, a wall made of lies. That night, Daniel sat on the floor of his room with a bottle of whiskey he hadn't touched in years. He stared at the ceiling, numb. The room felt too quiet, too clean. He thought about calling someone, Eleanor maybe, but what would he say? I lied to everyone, and now the only person who made me feel human doesn't even look at me. He didn't drink. Instead, he opened his laptop and began writing a letter. To Julia. Not to send it, just to feel the words. You looked at me like I was worth something, and I let you believe I was someone else. I thought I was protecting the moment, but I was just hiding from it. He didn't finish the letter. He couldn't. The next morning, Julia wasn't at work, nor the next day. Word spread among the staff that she had taken a few days off. Something about visiting her sister upstate. Daniel felt a strange panic. What if she didn't come back? What if this brief window, the only honest connection he'd had in years, was closing for good? On the third day, Eleanor knocked on his door. She looked tired, her hair in a messy bun, clipboard in hand. You okay? She asked, softer than usual. Daniel hesitated. Do you ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't belong to you? She didn't answer at first. Then she said, only every Tuesday. They both laughed, just a little. Then silence. She's a good one, Eleanor said. Julia. Been through more than most. Doesn't talk about it, but I've seen her come back from things most people wouldn't. Daniel nodded, his throat tightening. I think I messed it up. Eleanor gave him a long look. Then fix it. But be real this time. After she left, Daniel stood by the window, watching the snowfall cover the garden below. He felt more lost than ever. He had come here to disappear. And he had succeeded. He had become invisible, even to the one person who made him want to be seen. Later that evening he went down to the lobby. Julia was there. She had returned. She looked tired, her coat dusted with snow. When their eyes met, her expression didn't change. No smile, no anger. Just caution. Daniel took a breath, walked over. Can we talk? He asked. She looked at him quiet for a beat, then nodded once. They sat in the corner of the lounge, the fire crackling behind them. Daniel tried to find the words. But how do you explain a lie that began with good intentions and ended in silence? I haven't been honest with you, he said finally, about who I am. She tilted her head slightly. I know. That stunned him. I looked you up a week ago, she said. Something about the way you looked at the blueprints on the wall. No guest looks at blueprints like that. Daniel felt the weight of his own foolishness crash over him. Why didn't you say anything? He asked. Because I wanted to see if you'd tell me, she said quietly. But you didn't. Her voice wasn't angry. It was tired. He leaned forward, eyes pleading. I didn't want to lie. I wanted to be someone else for a while. Someone you could maybe like. You don't have to be someone else, she said, standing. But you do have to be honest. That's the part you still don't get. And then she walked away, leaving Daniel in a hotel he owned, surrounded by things he built, utterly, completely alone. If any part of this story is touching something in you, if you've ever felt unseen or fought to be understood, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. You're not alone. And sometimes just sharing is a step toward healing. Daniel didn't leave the lounge for a long time. After Julia walked away, he sat there in silence, watching the flames dance behind the glass. The warmth from the fireplace did nothing to thaw the cold that had taken root in his chest. He had built a life out of image, wealth, and control, and in doing so, he had become a stranger to everything real. The next morning, the snow had stopped, leaving behind a world blanketed in silence. Daniel walked through the hotel grounds alone, hands in his pockets, steps crunching against the icy path. He wasn't thinking about business or headlines or legacy. He was thinking about a voice, calm, honest, and tired, that had said, "You do have to be honest." That sentence echoed louder than any corporate speech or investor call ever had. He wandered into the staff wing and found himself outside the small storage room Julia had once used as her break area. The door was open. Inside, the walls were plain, a few old chairs pushed to the corners, but on the table sat something unexpected, a notebook, handwritten with a pen tucked into the spiral. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were sketches, flowers, buildings, bits of poetry written in the margins. One page read in careful cursive, "Sometimes I imagine a version of myself that was never broken. I wonder if she would recognize me." Daniel closed the notebook gently, overcome by a wave of humility. Julia wasn't just a quiet, kind woman. She was surviving something, rebuilding herself piece by piece, just like him. And for the first time, he understood. Hiding from who he was wouldn't free him. It would only chain him to the version of himself he hated most. He returned to his room and pulled out the letter he had started writing weeks ago. This time, he finished it. Every word was real. Every line an unraveling of his carefully curated mask, but he didn't send it. Instead, he printed it. Then he did something that made his heart pound harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He called Eleanor and asked for a favor. "I need to speak at the community event next week," he said. She paused. "Daniel, you sure?" "I've been hiding in my own hotel. I think it's time I came home." When the day came, Daniel stood on a small platform in the hotel's community room. Staff, guests, and locals filled the seats. Julia stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes guarded. He held the letter in his hands, but didn't read from it. Instead, he looked out at the people, at her, and began to speak. "I came here to disappear, but what I found was a mirror, and what I saw wasn't flattering. I lied. Not to hurt anyone, but because I didn't know how to be seen without my title, without my wealth. But I've learned something. The only thing more dangerous than being invisible is being fake." He paused, met her eyes. "And I'm tired of being fake." The applause at the end of his speech was polite, respectful, but Julia didn't clap. She didn't leave, either. She stood there, arms still folded, her expression unreadable. Daniel didn't expect forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for the first time in years, he felt light, honest, and that was something. After the event, he didn't retreat to his room. Instead, he sat in the staff dining area, ate with the employees, asked questions, listened. He realized he knew the names of the hotel's investors in Zurich, but not the night manager's daughter's name. That changed quickly. Over the next few days, Daniel began showing up to morning prep. Not to supervise, to help. He served breakfast, cleared tables, cleaned a few rooms with the housekeeping team. There were jokes, awkward smiles, disbelief, but they warmed up to him, slowly, because he didn't act like a boss. He didn't act like anything at all. Julia kept her distance, but he noticed her watching him from time to time. He didn't approach her, not yet. Instead, he let his actions speak. He asked Eleanor for a tour of the hotel's community partnerships. "Show me where we give back," he said. She took him to a small tutoring program they sponsored at the local school and to a shelter they donated linens to once a year. It was good, but it wasn't enough. That night, he drafted a new initiative, a full-scale reinvestment program for the community, job training, mental health support, scholarships, real change, not just charity, not under the Prescott name, just quietly, through the hotel. The next morning, he handed the proposal to Eleanor. No press releases, no media. I don't want credit. I just want to do something that matters." She smiled. "You already are." Still, there was a hollow space that nothing seemed to fill. Julia hadn't spoken to him since the speech. They passed in hallways, shared brief glances but not words, until one afternoon she left something on his door, a drawing, a small pencil sketch of the hotel's garden. Underneath, a single sentence: "Sometimes the roots grow deeper after the storm." It wasn't a conversation, but it was a beginning. That night, Daniel returned to the same garden, now dusted in snow. He sat on the bench she once paused at during her rounds, and he waited. Minutes passed. Then she appeared. No words, just her presence. She sat beside him, close but not touching, her breath visible in the cold air. "I saw what you've been doing," she said finally. He nodded. "It's not enough, but it's real. Why now?" He looked at her, eyes clear. "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not building for legacy. I'm building for connection." She didn't answer right away. But she didn't leave either. And for Daniel, that was enough to keep rebuilding. Rebuilding wasn't as cinematic as Daniel had once imagined. It wasn't a clean, upward arc. It was jagged, uneven. Some days, everything felt possible. Others, he questioned why he was even trying. People didn't forget overnight. Trust didn't bloom in silence. And guilt had a way of showing up even in moments of joy. One morning, Daniel arrived at the community center they were renovating, only to find the local contractor had backed out. The permits were delayed. The budget had ballooned overnight. He stood in the middle of the dusty floor, staring at exposed beams and half-finished wiring, and felt the old frustration boiling up. In the past, he would have yelled, made calls, demanded results. But now, he took a breath, rolled up his sleeves. He called a few friends, not businessmen but locals, and asked for help. The kind of help that wasn't bought, but borrowed in good faith. That same afternoon, he received a call from a tabloid journalist. Someone had leaked his presence at the hotel. They wanted a story. Millionaire disguises himself as poor man to win housekeeper's heart. The headline alone made his stomach turn. He declined to comment and doubled down on his vow. No press. This wasn't a stunt. This was his life. Messy, quiet, real. But the fallout came anyway. Julia saw the headline. He found her in the staff kitchen later that evening, arms crossed, the article open on her phone. "Is this why you've been doing all this?" she asked, voice flat. His heart dropped. "No, I swear. I didn't know. Someone must have seen me, recognized. You said no more lies." And I meant it. The silence that followed was worse than anger, worse than shouting. It was disbelief. And Daniel knew this wasn't just about the article, it was about all the moments before it, where he should have trusted her with the truth. "I can't keep trying if I don't know who I'm trying with," she said softly, then left. That night Daniel didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and felt the old voice creeping in again. "You're just like your father, cold, controlling, alone." But this time he fought back. The next day he called a staff meeting. No scripts, no titles, just Daniel. He stood before them and said, "You deserve the truth. I came here to hide. I used a fake name. I let you believe I was someone else. And that was wrong. But I'm not hiding anymore. I'm staying, not as your boss, as your peer, if you'll let me." Some nodded. Some stayed quiet. But no one walked out. It wasn't redemption, but it was accountability. Later, he left another letter on Julia's door. No grand gestures, just the truth. "This isn't about you forgiving me. It's about me learning how to stop lying to myself." Days passed. Then a week. No reply. Then, one night, a knock at his door. He opened it, and there she was. "You still have a lot to learn," she said, "but I haven't stopped hoping you will." And with that, the rebuild continued. Not with certainty, but with something better, hope. Spring came slowly that year, thawing the snow, and with it, the weight Daniel had been carrying. The garden outside the hotel, once a quiet, forgotten space, was alive again. Tulips broke through the soil, the fountain bubbled gently, and benches that had once felt cold now invited warmth. Daniel stood beside one of those benches, holding a folded letter in his hand. Not a confession this time, not an apology, just words, honest ones. He glanced up as Julia approached. She looked different somehow, not just in appearance, but in presence. Stronger. Or maybe he was just seeing her more clearly now. She stopped in front of him, hands in her jacket pockets, waiting. He handed her the letter, but she didn't take it. "Say it," she said quietly. "Whatever's in there, say it out loud." Daniel nodded, took a breath and looked her in the eyes. "When I first came here, I was running. From pressure, from expectations, from the part of me that was too proud to admit I was broken. Then I met you, and suddenly being invisible didn't feel safe anymore. It felt lonely. Because you saw me. Not the name, not the legacy, just me." He paused, swallowing the emotion rising in his throat. "I let fear turn into lies. And I've spent every day since trying to replace those lies with truth. Not to win you back, but because I can't go back to the version of myself I used to be. Not after this. Not after you." Julia didn't speak right away. She looked down, the breeze gently moving strands of her hair. Then she sat on the bench and patted the space beside her. He joined her, their shoulders almost touching. "Do you know what I saw when I first met you?" she asked, eyes on the garden. Daniel shook his head. Sadness. Deep, controlled sadness. Like someone who learned to smile without feeling it. I've known that kind of sadness. He looked at her, listening carefully. "You weren't the only one pretending," she continued. "I wore my own mask, smiled for tips, nodded at rude guests, pretended I didn't mind when people looked through me, but then there you were, sitting alone, reading a book like it was the only thing keeping you from disappearing. And I thought, maybe he understands." A long pause. The birds chirped softly in the background. "I didn't fall for David Price," she said. "I fell for the man who offered to help an old couple with their luggage, who asked me about my favorite poems, who listened without trying to fix me." Daniel turned to face her. "So, where does that leave us?" She smiled, faint, but real. "It leaves us here, learning, trying, together if we're brave enough." Tears welled in his eyes, unhidden this time. She reached over and took his hand, and in that simple gesture, everything shifted. Weeks later, the hotel hosted a community celebration to mark the launch of the new initiatives: free mental health counseling, local employment training, and a fund in Julia's mother's name for single mothers returning to school. It wasn't just a project, it was a promise. Daniel spoke at the event, but this time not from a script. "I used to think legacy meant buildings and money. Now I know it means something deeper. It means using what you've been given to lift someone else. It means showing up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Julia stood beside him, her presence grounding him more than applause ever could. After the speeches, Daniel found himself alone for a moment, watching the guests mingle. He thought about his father, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Franklin Prescott had built an empire, but Daniel had built something different. Something lasting. A boy once shaped by cold approval had become a man molded by vulnerability, and that man, scarred but stronger, had finally found the kind of love that asked for nothing but truth. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Julia walked up beside him. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. He turned to her and smiled. "Home never felt like a place to me," he said, "but I think I found it anyway." She squeezed his hand gently. "Welcome home." Not every story of love begins with honesty. Sometimes it starts with fear. The fear of being truly seen, of being rejected, not for our mistakes, but for the truths we've buried beneath them. Daniel's journey wasn't just about finding love. It was about unlearning everything he thought made him worthy of it. For years, he believed value came from power, that respect came from control, that love could be earned through perfection. But all of that shattered the moment someone saw him without the title, the wealth, the armor, and chose to stay anyway. His story reminds us that hiding doesn't protect us from pain, it only delays it, and that the masks we wear to be accepted often end up becoming cages. It's easy to chase the appearance of connection, much harder to face ourselves first, broken pieces and all. Julia's strength wasn't just in her kindness. It was in her boundaries, in her ability to walk away when her trust was betrayed, and then, even more so, in her willingness to return when she saw real change. Because love isn't blind. It sees the cracks and chooses to believe they can heal. In the end, what Daniel built wasn't just a new chapter. It was a foundation for something honest. And honesty, when chosen over pride, becomes the most powerful kind of legacy. After the celebration, Daniel didn't return to the corporate world, not in the way people expected. He stepped down as CEO of Prescott Hotels and appointed a leadership team committed to social responsibility. He remained on the board, but his focus shifted entirely. He and Julia stayed in Vermont. The hotel where everything changed became their home base, not just a place to sleep, but a place to grow. Together, they launched a non-profit using part of Daniel's inheritance, focused on mental health support and career development for hospitality workers across the country. Every week, Daniel taught free workshops at the local center, finance, leadership, life skills. But he started each session with a story, often his own, told with vulnerability that once would have terrified him. The man who had once measured life by profit now measured it by impact. Julia continued her work in quiet ways. She mentored young women at the shelter, shared her art through small community exhibits, and helped shape the nonprofit's emotional core. She and Daniel didn't chase fame. They chased meaning. Over time, the media moved on, the spotlight faded, and that was exactly what they wanted. They built a life not of perfection, but of truth, and in that truth, they found everything they never knew they needed. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself just to be accepted, pretended to be someone else because the truth felt too risky to share? Maybe you've been on the other side, trusting someone, only to find out they weren't who you thought they were. Daniel's story is about more than love. It's about the courage it takes to take off the mask and say, "This is who I really am." And it's also about the strength it takes to forgive, to believe that people can grow, and that healing is possible when honesty leads the way. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a choice between protecting your image and living your truth? What did you choose? And why? Share your story in the comments. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today, and if this story moved you, help us spread it. Like, comment, and share this video with someone who might be carrying the weight of silence. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here at The Weight of Choice, every week we bring you real, raw stories of people who chose to change everything. Because sometimes the hardest choice is the one that sets you free.